Today, there's a few thoughts that I had on my mind that I wanted to share. The thing that I was thinking about is I'm big on perspective. I really like the idea of perspective and how you look at the world, and that really affects how affects your attitude. It affects the way that you see things, but it also affects the way that you live, like your reality. And I don't mean it affects objective reality. I mean it affects the way that you perceive the world around you, and the way that the world around you influences your attitude and influences your way of thinking, and it influences the person that you are. And so the thing that I was thinking about is life really is what you make it. Life is what you make it to be. And the thing that brought that up in my mind was I was thinking about my my grandpa's name. I was named after my grandpa, and his name's Fred. He died before I was born. I never got to meet him. And I was talking to my dad one time about him, and I asked my dad what it is that he thought of his dad. Like, just try and get to know him, trying to understand this person that I was named after. And my grandpa, my dad told me about his life, and if you were to ask him, he would always say he was the richest man in the world. My grandpa was a turkey farmer. He was a humble man, but he always had this attitude of he is the richest man in the world. And as my dad explained he would explain it to me. He would tell me how my grandpa thought that he lived a charmed life, that he didn't have any trials or any troubles. And my dad looked at me and he told me, Fred, he said, your grandpa had just as many trials as most people, more than um, he didn't say, I don't remember exactly, but he said he had plenty of trials, he had plenty of struggles, but his attitude was always, I lived a charmed life. And I thought of that, and that really, I have tried to live that way myself. We all have different things that we would view as hard, or we view as a trial or a struggle. But when we look at the struggles that other people go through, a lot of times our struggles don't seem nearly as bad. They really are what we make them out to be. When we get knocked down and beat down and in the dumps, one of the things that we have a choice on is we can look at the blessings that we have, and we can have an attitude of gratefulness, or we can curse God, we can get upset, we can get frustrated. And that's a choice that we make. We make the choice whether we have a good attitude or a bad attitude. We don't choose what happens to us, but we choose how we react and how we handle that. And that comes into a lot of different things in life. It hits a lot of different areas in life. There's times where you get down and you get frustrated, and if you let yourself focus on the negative, on the downsides, it will just bring you down. It will just bring you sadness. And sometimes you get to the point where you don't know what else to view. You don't know what else to look at. Like you can't look at something else other than the darkness and the sadness and the evil and the hard time they're going through. And that's a hard place to be, because to get out of it, you have to stop doing it. But in doing it, it makes it harder to get out of it. And it's just it's a difficult place to be in. It's easy looking from the outside and saying, oh, you just got to be positive. Oh, you just got to think of your blessings. Count your blessings. That's easy to say. But when you're in the thick of being beaten down and being just down on your luck, down, whatever it is, when you get put to the test and you get refined, it's a difficult process. But the way that you get out of that, I think, is you really just have to decide. As I love the idea of being deliberate. You have to decide. There was a friend of mine who we worked together, and he's a really good guy that I have a lot of respect for. And I remember there was one time where he had a question about a boss that had done something, and the boss said that he had done something by mistake, and my friend's like, yeah, I believe that. He chose to believe that. And I could tell it was one of those things where it could have been not a mistake, and then when my friend pointed it out, it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do what you tell, like you caught me type of thing. Or it could have been a real mistake. My friend chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt like that, I think, is so important in being Christian. I think that that's a part of charity. Now, as Christ said, you want to be wise as serpents, but what is it? Innocent or gentle as doves. Anyways, you don't want to let people take advantage of you. But whenever you can, giving the other people the benefit of the doubt, it makes it easier to have a positive attitude. It makes it easier to not get frustrated when things don't go the way that you want them to. And it's difficult to do that over and over again. It's difficult to do that when you don't think that person deserves it. But that's what makes it charity. That's what makes it a deliberate choice to think kindly of someone, to think well of someone, and not necessarily to be blind to what their intentions could be, not to let someone take advantage of you and your family, but to deliberately be patient, and that really changes your perspective on things. It changes how you view things, and it's a very important part of this life, and it's like anything else. It's something you have to practice at. It doesn't just come naturally. It doesn't just come without choosing to do it. It's something you have to take a step and decide, okay, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, but maybe it was just an accident. Maybe it was just a bad day. One of the things that I always thought interesting is when most of the time, most of our interactions with people that are unpleasant, most of our interactions when we get down or get frustrated or get mad at each other, I suspect that most of them are when we see someone at less than their best and they see us at less than our best, and we clash at that time. Because we're all like this. Sometimes we're doing great and we're being good people and we're being followers of Christ. And sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're just frustrated with life. Sometimes we're just not as good as what we could be. And it's just the way that life is. And when we get down and when we run into someone else who's down and we crush and we bang heads, it's one of those things that you can have lasting relationships be damaged because you're viewing this point where you come together and you're both not at your best. And anytime you think back on that, that's how you think that relationship is. But it doesn't have to be that way, and it doesn't need to be that way. Because we're all just trying to get better. We're all just trying to get back to Christ. That's what good people do. And if you know that you're with good people, it's easy to give them the benefit of the doubt. If you don't know that you're with good people, be wise. Be wise. One of the things that, as I went to Romania, the first time I went, I was a missionary. And in Romania, I come from a really small town that has like 2 stoplights. We don't have billboards. It's small. Well, in Romania, the capital city's got like 5 million people, and every city we were in was 300, 400,000 people. And they're just big cities that I was in. And when you get into big cities like that, you have lots of billboards, you have lots of nudity and people that are half naked and stuff like that. And it's a bit of a shock. The first area that I was in Constanța, which is right on the sea. And it's you have all these, right during the summer, you have all these women that are just very immodestly dressed. And when you're being a missionary and you're trying to teach people of Christ, you can't be distracted by the carnal self. You can't be focused on women and still have the Spirit with you when that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And I remember there was this guy that talked to us as missionaries. He was from Germany. He was actually a doctor, and he was talking to us about being healthy and stuff like that. Just because we were all young men that were um, trying to grow up, I guess you could say. But he one of the things he said is he addressed the pornography. He addressed the how you go down the street and you see all sorts of stuff that you don't want to have in your mind. And he said, if you try and fight it, you're going to lose. Oh, I can't think of that. Oh, I can't think of that. Oh, I thought of that. Oh, I can't think of that. I can't think. Oh, I thought of that. Oh, and it's just, you're going to lose every time. Every time you try and bring it up to fight it, you lose. So what do? You know that you want to have pure thoughts. You know you want to be virtuous. You want to garnish your thoughts with virtue. But you're inundated by the carnal man. You live in the world. And he said, you have to let it go. Said, oh, I saw something. Okay, move on. You let it go. You just let it roll off of you. You don't sit and fight it and think, oh, I can't think of that. Because in the process of trying to fight it, you bring it into your mind and bring it into your heart. And it becomes an obsession almost. And it was really interesting. When I was very at the beginning of my mission, I was in the city, this Constanza, it's on the sea, and you would have these girls that were dressed very immodestly, very very transparently dressed with their clothes. Like you'd see nipples all the time and stuff like that. And it was one of those things where it was like you just moved on. You don't focus on the things that bring that those carnal desires into you. And it was an interesting thing, because I look back on it, and controlling our mind, controlling the way that we think about things, I think that that's one of the most important things in this life. That's one of the most important things that we do, because it's so difficult to do. How do you fight against your mind? How do you fight against the way that you think? And that's I think that's one of the reasons why I love perspective so much, is because as we change our perspective, as we change the way that we think and the way that our mind actually thinks, we change who we are, and we become something better. We become something purer and something more able to be used by God. And it's so important. Life really is what we make it. And that, letting it go, that relates to pornography, that relates to having virtuous thoughts, but it also relates to anger. It also relates to when you get into fights. There was a friend of mine who I go to church with, and he was really frustrated because there was a guy that goes to church together, and he didn't like him. He didn't like him because the guy had wronged him long ago or something like that. And he asked me, he's like, what do you do in this kind of situation where we both want to follow Christ, but every time I see that guy, it makes me mad. It gets me upset, and it brings me back to how he hurt me. And I talked to him about it. I was like, dude, I don't know, but this is what I try. And I asked him if that helped. And a few weeks later, he's like, he said it made a big difference for him. It made a big difference for him, because instead of sitting there trying to be like, oh, I want to think of Christ, but look at that guy. I want to think of Christ. I want to be good, but do you know what he did? Do you know how bad that hurt my career, or that hurt my whatever it was? And he instead of trying to fight those emotions and those feelings, he let it go. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things about Christ's atonement, is when we hold on to things. I mean, it was really confusing to me for a long time. There's a scripture that says, judge not lest ye be judged, for with that judgment ye judge others, shall ye be judged. And it made me think, like, if we really think that we can hold a grudge against someone else, if we really think that we can be angry at someone else and that we're justified in that, what we're really saying is we don't think that Christ's suffering and his atonement was sufficient for what that person did to you. We don't think it was enough. it was one of those things that, like, if we're not willing to forgive others, it's dangerous for us. It's dangerous for our souls. And I'm not saying, again, Christ told us to be wise. He told us to be wise as serpents, but innocent, but guileless. And there's a balance in there of not letting yourself be hurt over and over again, of not letting yourself be taken advantage of by someone who means you ill, but also of forgiving. There's it's just some beautiful stuff. I'm kind of going on, but yeah, that's life. Really is what we make it. We have so many opportunities to do good to others and to receive to see the good in others. Let's try and take more advantage of those. Well, rock the party, everyone.